The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers.
Hello, everyone.
Before we get into tonight's stories, we want to thank everyone out there for their continued support.
Yes, thank you very much.
And there are a few ways you can support our show. One way is by purchasing our monthly premium bonus episodes. And another way you can support the show is by going onto your favorite listening app and leaving us a 5-star rating and a comment. It's free to do and it only takes a few seconds. But for us, it really helps us move up the list so more people can find our show.
Yeah, and tell your family and friends about us. Maybe they'd like to give us a listen too. And since you like listening to us, we bet you'd like reading 13 fictional short stories I wrote based on urban legends from around the country. We're so excited to announce that our first short story collection is available on Amazon Kindle.
That's right, it is, and you can find a link to it on our webpage or directly on Kindle. It's titled The Where Our Minds Wander Podcast Presents 13 Creepy Urban Legends. But that's not the only book that we have in our storefront.
No, it's not. I'm also excited to let everyone know that in addition to the creepy urban legends, one of the novels that I've written is also available. It's about a trio of genetically modified teenagers who need to save everyone who lives in an underground facility on a ruined planet Earth. So it's science fiction, but with some paranormal elements thrown in. It's titled Project Earth, and that's Earth spelled A-E-R-T-H.
And don't be so modest, Beth. You know that over the years you've written several novels, and we're finally getting them up on the Kindle store, on Amazon. And there will be a second part to Project Earth that's called
Planet Smar.
So that one should be releasing pretty soon on the Amazon store also.
Yes. And lastly, if you haven't joined our Where Our Minds Wander Facebook page, you should give that a try too. We post weekly pictures and updates, and it's a great place to find like-minded people. Or you could always follow us on Twitter or TikTok too.
Alrighty, that's about it for this week's housekeeping. Let's get into tonight's stories.
All right, I'm going to start us off tonight. The little boy, about 6 years old, stands in front of a glass-paned doorway, the room behind him in complete darkness. His blonde hair is cropped short, and his hands hang at his sides. He's dressed in shorts and a pale blue t-shirt. You don't have to look very hard before you notice that the panes of glass behind him are peppered with small, illuminated, ghostly handprints from the inside of the glass, as though phantom children have been desperately trying to get his attention or escape. On the same side of the glass as this sweet little boy, to his right, stands a life-size doll topped with wavy brown hair. She's wearing a sleeveless dress, also pale blue or gray, which accents the joints of her lifeless arms. Clutched in her hand is what many people online claim is a toy gun aimed at the boy. If you happen to be on the internet in the year 2000, when the image first went viral, you may know exactly what I'm describing. It's a painting titled The Hands Resist Him. And if you have seen it, then I'm sure you already know the story. The painting is notoriously haunted. In the last 23 years, the painting has been discussed in online forums, it's been turned into memes, and it's made it onto pretty much every single list of haunted objects. So how did a painting created back in 1972 suddenly become an internet sensation 28 years later? Why is it still on every haunted object list to this day? Well, sit back and let me tell you. In February of 2000, a new listing popped up on eBay. This was the description. Quote, "When we received this painting, we thought it was really good art. At the time, we wondered a little why a seemingly perfectly fine painting would be discarded like that. Today, we don't. One morning, our 4.5-year-old daughter claimed that the children in the picture were fighting and coming into the room during the night." End quote. People were intrigued and wanted to know more, which the sellers were happy to provide. They had come across the painting out by a dumpster behind a brewery. After their daughter's complaints, the father set up a motion-sensitive camera in his daughter's room to prove to her that there was nothing to be afraid of. Wow, was he wrong? The camera picked up something terrifying. The boy in the painting actually crawled out of it. Other footage seems to show the doll forcing the boy to leave the painting because she's threatening him with the gun in her hand. The sellers included a disclaimer that they were not liable for anything that happened once the painting was sold. Buyers and the curious went wild. The listing got more than 30,000 views. Some people who just looked at the painting in the listing claimed to have creepy experiences. One viewer reported to the seller that they heard a horrible exorcist-like voice when they just looked at it and felt a blast of hot air hit them in the face. Another said that as soon as he pulled up the listing, his computer screen went all white and his computer emitted a blast of heat. Some people claimed to feel a choking sensation, and one even fainted. Another claimed he felt so ill after looking at the listing that he smudged his house with white sage to cleanse the space. And several parents claimed that when their children saw the painting, they began screaming uncontrollably. Then, more of the story came out. When The Hands Resist Him was first shown in a gallery in 1972, the gallery owner died within a year. An art critic who reviewed the one-man show that included the painting also died within 1 year. And the man who bought the painting from the gallery, actor John Marley, died within a year. The initial starting bid on eBay for the painting was $199, but with over 30,000 people clamoring to see it, a bidding war began between 30 potential buyers. It ended up going to the Perception Gallery in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for $1,025. Now that they owned a famously haunted painting, the gallery owners decided to contact the artist himself and get his take on it. His reaction was one of total delight and complete surprise. In 1972, Bill Stoneham signed a contract with the Feingarten Art Gallery in California. He needed to produce 2 paintings a month to fulfill his contract. Bill was having painter's block, and his wife at the time had just finished writing a poem about him titled Hands Resist Him. In the poem, she wrote about Bill's adoption and not knowing his biological siblings. The poem really resonated with him, And when he came across an old photo his parents had taken of him and a neighborhood friend when Bill was around age 5, he felt inspired. He told the Daily Dot that his family was staying with his grandmother in Chicago that summer to save money while his father traveled for work. The home was so small that Bill had to sleep on a mat in a closet. With all the clothes hanging around him, he said he felt as if he was an article of clothing. He spent that summer playing outside with a little girl from the neighborhood, and at one point his parents asked the 2 children to pose in front of a glass door for a photograph. So, combining his wife's poem and this photo in his mind, Bill began to paint. On his website, the Stoneham Studios, Bill posted that he was also drawing on Jungian philosophy as well, the whole collective unconscious idea, the veil between waking and dreaming. He explained that the glass door in the painting represents the veil between wakefulness and dreaming, and that all the handprints on the glass represent the other lives available to us in our dreams. The life-size doll represents an imagined companion or a guide between these 2 realms. He also pointed out that the doll isn't holding a gun. She's actually holding a large dry cell battery. Directly to the side of it is the edge of the broken window casing. And frankly, once I read that and looked at the painting on his website, that's clearly what it is. When The Hands Resist Him was shown at the Feingarten Gallery, an art critic from the Los Angeles Times did show up and review Bill's work. The critic, Henry Seldis, loved Bill's paintings and wrote, quote, "William Stoneham's paintings are at their best when they're at their weirdest." He complimented Bill's style by saying his work combined the best of surrealism with contemporary leanings. From the gallery, the painting was purchased by actor John Marley. He was best known for being in The Godfather. After that, Bill lost track of his painting. He has no idea how it would have ended up inside a brewery or by the dumpster of a brewery. He does say on his website that both the Times critic and the Feingarten Gallery owner did die within a year of The Hands Resist Him being on show, but he personally chalks it up to pure coincidence. Actor John Marley, by the way, also died after he bought the painting, but he'd also sold it before then to someone else. Coincidence and an ingenious marketing ploy by eBay sellers may be all that's really going on with Bill's painting. Some sources say the original eBay ad was posted by an elderly couple who merely claimed the painting was cursed. Some sources say, no, it was always a younger couple with small children, and it was more than cursed. And when confronted with the reality that the gun in the doll's hand is really just a battery and part of the window, which you can clearly see on Bill's own webpage that has his original painting, that is what it is, staunch believers will argue that no, it may just look like a battery sometimes, but it turns into a gun when the doll and the boy come to life. Even today, in 2023, you can find copious YouTube videos about the painting's subjects moving and about the curse. There are countless comparison photos between the painting and the original picture of Bill and the neighborhood girl. It's not very hard to find endless hours of reading on hundreds of sites, all of which seem to regurgitate the same stories. And the Perception Gallery in Grand Rapids, they're the gallery that purchased the painting off eBay in 2000 for about $1,000. They unveiled it in 2013 on Halloween. Again, ingenious marketing. But what few people realize is that The Hands Resist Him is actually 1/4 of a 4-painting series. Over the years, Bill has painted the other 3. Each one shows a different stage in the little boy's life and how his relationship to the doll has changed. Remember, the doll represents a guide between the realms of dreams and real life. So, for me, it's when you see the 4 of these paintings together that a real creep factor sets in. Especially the hands invent him, which Bill finished in 2017. In it, you see the other side of the glass door and a young boy surrounded by discarded toys. Outside the room is the dark silhouette of the original little boy and the doll. But then, the other 2, Resistance at the Threshold and What Remains, are equally as creepy. They don't have to be cursed or haunted to make you feel uneasy. Maybe that's the whole point. Or maybe the whole point is that people like to be scared and they like to feel part of something. It's not really hurting anyone. And The Hands Resist Him certainly took off into the stratosphere as one of the most haunted paintings in the world. If it gets more people to look at art, then I'm all for it. I highly recommend that everyone go to the Stoneham Gallery website and check the original paintings out. Now, this is just an aside, but I thought it was really cool. Bill also worked for many years at Industrial Light and Magic, which has nothing to do with it, but I thought it was cool.
No, it's very cool. And we've seen the paintings online, and they are astonishing. So I would say, for all of you out there, if you haven't seen them, go ahead, check them out. See what you think about it all.
Yeah. Hey, did you know? In the event that nuclear world destruction actually happens, you can always hitch a ride on one of the 4 Night Watch aircraft, otherwise known as the Doomsday planes. Each modified plane contains 5,000 square feet of office space and living quarters, as well as a mobile command station with the capabilities to contact any radio station or telephone number or broadcast video. Manned by a 65-person crew, the Doomsday planes can stay airborne for days at a time, safe from radiation, EMF, and detonation blindness. Not just anyone can hitch a ride, though. Sorry. Doomsday planes are just for top military officials. Who'da thunk it? All right, Wes, what are you talking about tonight?
Well, this topic came up in conversation the other night when we were hanging out with a friend, and it is one that we had never heard of before. It's a different kind of UFO encounter that he thought we'd probably get a kick out of.
And we did, although I think he was a little surprised that we hadn't heard of it, but it's an awesome story. So a big thank you to Johnny for suggesting it to us.
Yes, thank you very much, Johnny. So, over the decades since Roswell, people have received some rather interesting gifts from extraterrestrials. Now, most of these gifts, they come in the form of knowledge about technology and our future. Some gifts aren't really gifts at all. There are numerous stories about people claiming to be abducted by ETs and being probed and having experiments done on them. The encounters that humans have had with ETs are mostly harmless, but sometimes they can be quite aggressive. But in the 1961 case of Joseph Simonton, aliens presented him with a rather unusual gift: pancakes.
Flapjacks.
At 11 a.m. on April 18, 1961, a plumber in Wisconsin named Joseph Simonton was washing his morning dishes at the kitchen sink. All of a sudden, he heard loud screeching outside that sounded like a car that was going too fast and then braked too hard around a curve. He looked out his window and he saw what he thought was part of his roof falling to the ground somehow. But if it was very strange because it wasn't really falling. It looked more like an elevator lowering to the ground. And blown-off roofs just don't do that. Plus, his roof was green and whatever this was silver. And it was disc-shaped. Just like any of us, he had to see what it was, so he stepped outside. Hovering mere inches above his driveway was a 12-foot-high, 30-foot in diameter UFO. He said it was, quote, brighter than chrome and shaped like two plates or bowls, one inverted over the top of the other, end quote. Joseph was really curious. He later said he wasn't afraid at all, so he walked towards the craft. As he did, a hatch opened in the craft, just like the trunk of a car. Inside the craft were 3 humanoid figures, each about 5 feet tall. They were dressed in thick black clothing from head to toe, like a jumpsuit, but with no buttons or zippers. Now, although it was dark inside the craft, he could clearly see that 2 of the figures seemed to be belted or harnessed to their workstations. One was, quote, busily engaged at the panel or control boards, end quote. But the other alien, well, it seemed to be cooking, or at least trying. Joseph swears the alien or spaceman was bent over what appeared to be some sort of flameless grill and that there was smoke rising from it. The third figure approached Joseph, and he assumed it was the one that was in charge, since it had a white stripe down its pants leg that the other 2 didn't seem to have. He described the humanoid alien as, quote, swarthy like an Italian, but it was hairless. No eyebrows, no stubble, just smooth skin. He couldn't say if the figure had hair on its head because it wore a tight-fitting cap. The figure did not speak. In fact, none of the strange figures spoke. The one with the white stripe just stared at him with a deep, penetrating look. So now, just to be clear, Joseph never felt anything but curiosity as he interacted with them. I mean, an alien that's cooking brunch in your yard isn't exactly threatening. At this point, the alien with the striped pants tilted its head and lifted its arm, like it was miming the action of drinking. It handed Joseph a metal container with 2 handles that looked kind of like a soup tureen. The alien's stare was so intense that Joseph said he had to look away, but he understood what the aliens wanted: water. Joseph brought the container down to the water pump that was in his basement. He filled it up and returned to his driveway, where all 3 aliens were waiting patiently. He tried not to look at them until he was close enough to them again, because when the aliens stared at him, Joseph said it felt like they could read his mind. Joseph wanted to keep his encounter going. He was hoping he could get to talk to them, so after handing them the water, he pantomimed eating. The grillmaster alien scooped up whatever he was cooking and presented 4 of them to Joseph. They were 4 hot, greasy, and rather burnt-looking pancakes. Then, the grillmaster alien tapped the fingertips of its right hand on Joseph's forehead very quickly. Joseph assumed it was some sort of salute, and because he didn't want to offend them, he did it right back to the alien. The 3 aliens quickly reboarded their spacecraft. The hatch closed so seamlessly that Joseph couldn't even tell that there had ever been an opening. The UFO then rose about 20 feet up in the air. It tipped 45 degrees and shot off towards the south. The force of the craft taking off actually bent one of the trees in his yard backwards for a few seconds before it sprung right back up as though nothing ever happened at all. After they left, Joseph decided to try a bite of his alien-made pancakes. He said, quote, if that was their food, God help them because it tasted like a piece of cardboard. If that's what they had to live on, no wonder they were so small. And that was it. That was Joseph Simonton's encounter with pancake-cooking aliens. Or so he thought. Within a couple of days, it was all over town that Joseph had dined with aliens. Newspapers picked up the story, and they did their best to include every tongue-in-cheek joke that they could in their articles. But Joseph, he stuck to his story, although 2 things really annoyed him about it. First was that the papers called him a chicken farmer when his main occupation was plumbing. And second, some people didn't want to hire a plumber who said that they had saw aliens. Now, it's unfortunate that the media chose to make fun of him because he lost a lot of work because of it. To help vouch for his honesty, he voluntarily gave one of his prized alien pancakes to a local judge who publicly agreed that Joseph was indeed an honest man. But for the most part, the locals believed Joseph. And then 2 other witnesses came forward, saying that they also had seen the UFO. Savino Borgo, who was an insurance agent, was driving towards Joseph's farm when he observed the flying saucer on April 18th. And Phyllis Lorbetsky and her 3 children also saw the object flying in the skies around the vicinity of the Symington farm also. Somebody ended up calling the United States Air Force about what people were seeing. When personnel from the Antigo Air Force Station's radar squadron came to talk with Joseph, he told him his story, and then he voluntarily gave them one of the pancakes. They sent the pancake off to the Aeronautical Systems Division to be analyzed, and I'll tell you about the results in just a few minutes. The Air Force investigators were 100% convinced that Joseph was not masterminding some sort of hoax and that he was actually telling them the truth. So somebody with the Air Force made a call to Project Blue Book. On April 26, J. Allen Hynek came to talk with Joseph Symington. Now, if you watched any documentaries about Project Blue Book, then you've heard of Hynek. At the time, Hynek was working as a professor at Northwestern University, and he was also the chairman of the astronomy department. He invited 2 graduate students to go along with him to interview Joseph. They offered to take him out to eat at a local diner. Hynek noted that all the other diners greeted Joseph with the utmost respect during their meal. Then after they were through, Hynek went to the local bar and asked the patrons there what they had heard about Joseph's alien encounter. It was his opinion that most people he spoke to believed that Joseph was actually telling the truth. It seems as though Hynek's biggest issue seemed to be with the Air Force. He wasn't happy that they had gotten involved, or that they had done their own investigation, and he was really annoyed that they had called Project Blue Book. He claimed that the only reason he was investigating Joseph at all was because of the, quote, possible nuisance value. Now, that's the first part of this that I find a bit odd. Throughout his career investigating UFO claims, Hynek often criticized the military, specifically the Air Force, for not supporting any evidence of UFOs. But with this investigation, it's almost as if he was annoyed that they found Joseph believable. Now, my only thought about this is that maybe Hynek was annoyed because the Air Force chose this specific case to support. Maybe he thought that the Air Force supported it because Joseph's encounter was so outlandish that they were actually mocking the whole idea of UFOs by giving this case their attention. Now, my theory might hold some weight if I circle back to the results of the United States Air Force's analysis of what the pancake was actually made of. So are you ready for this?
I can't wait.
Low-protein flour, sugar, and salt cooked in hydrogenated oil.
Oh, man.
I know.
That's it?
Still sounds good. But being the thorough man that Hynek was, he took his own alien pancake sample from Joseph and sent it off to the FDA for analysis. Their analysis came back that it consisted of fat, starch, buckwheat hulls, wheat bran, and soybean hulls.
Aw, double man.
So it was just a run-of-the-mill, everyday, ordinary buckwheat pancake.
That stinks.
I know. If you're like me, it's really disappointing. You know, I think we all wanted it to have something more alien mixed into it somewhere.
Well, yeah.
But, you know, if you look at it, it doesn't really take away from the fact that Joseph Symington swore he encountered spacemen that day. And perhaps he did. Maybe this story is an example of the theory that aliens are really human time travelers. Now, just bear with me a moment. Maybe the trio of Italian-looking aliens dressed in black were really time-traveling Italian men from the future. Hynek had his own ideas, of course. In his report, which you can read online, I found the second thing that confused me about this case. He wrote that Joseph seemed 100% sound of mind, but his conclusion was that Joseph had suffered a hallucination that caused delusions. Now, according to Charles Lear, the author of Flying Saucer Investigators, this was a really uncommon explanation for Hynek to give. Apparently, citing someone's supposed mental state as an explanation for an encounter wasn't something Hynek did very often. If that's what it really was, it kind of stinks. I mean, if you're going to have an alien encounter, I think helping them to make pancakes and then being offered some is kind of a nice gesture.
I think so too. And if I was going to have an alien encounter, that's the type I would want to have.
Well, hell yeah, pancakes are better than being probed.
Well, anything's better than being probed.
I guess it depends on who's doing the probing.
Or how bad the pancakes taste.
Right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this episode, Beth.
Sure. And as always, if you'd like to know more about the topics we covered, you can always go to our show notes to find our sources. Or you could ask Johnny, our friend.
Right, you could. And as we've mentioned before, if you'd like to meet us and you're into Bigfoot, mark September 30th on your calendars. Beth and I will be at the 2023 Whitehall Sasquatch Festival in Whitehall, New York, and we'd love to meet you all.
Yes, it's on September 30th. We're going to keep saying it until all of you show up.
Well, with that all said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Minds Wander.
See you soon.